Hey guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp of the Month, and I'm here with a special treat for you all. You can definitely tell this is a large game that I have set out in front of you. Obviously, Vietnam. This is, and I'm trying here, don't hold it against me, Nguyen Hue 72, the 1972 Easter Offensive in Vietnam. Now, this game is by Cadet Games, and the game was designed by R.J. Mills, produced by Mr. Kevin Talley. Now, Cadet Games has a whole bunch of different games that, what's the best way to put it? Axis and Allies-esque, okay? So the games that have that little mini, right? Bunch of little minis like these. They have infantry, they have tanks, they have armored vehicles, they have artillery, there's helicopters, there's trucks, there's planes, there's bombers, there's even a ship in this game. All those different little types of minis, okay? I love the way that these things look. And as you can see, I've got the game basically laid out there. A few things that aren't quite finished yet, but I wanted to show you guys in the course of setup how it all kind of plays out, because there is some hidden unit stuff going on here. Now, I haven't touched on Cadet Game stuff too much. I've done a couple of preview videos before talking about a few of their things. But if you like this style of game, absolutely go check out their website, because they have some really cool stuff on their website. Like I said, Cadet Games, and they cover a variety of topics. There are some that are like this, this is all of Vietnam. This is more of a strategic level. There are some that scale it down a little bit, get into the tactical. They have their own Axis and Allies one where it's Market Garden, I believe. And actually, there's one that I think is a really good deal. It's 2 games for basically one cost. Comes out to, I think it's $90 for both of them. It's They Were Soldiers and Dak To, both of them together. And those really caught my attention. Like I said, not as high level, strategic level as this, but definitely check them out, because they're really cool stuff. And if you like the mini aspect like me, I love seeing all the minis spread across the board. It just looks cooler than hell. In my opinion. If you get into that stuff, they've got some really cool games that's worth checking out. I do need to state up front, absolutely, so you guys know my biases, that they did send me a copy of this. So this one was sent to me. Now, to be fair, when I say that though, I had actually kind of chatted with them a little bit about it, and I wanted them to send me something so I could actually cover it. Right. And I don't say that to many publishers. Usually I'm so swamped. I am not asking anyone for anything because I'm too busy to keep up with the ones that I'm being sent as it is. But I like their stuff. I like what they've got going out. And I really did want to cover more of their products and kind of get it out there so more people could see this stuff. When it comes to the components of the game itself, you're going to have the rulebook that I already showed you guys. You're going to have 2 standard sized maps that have 6 folds. Absolutely be careful when you are folding these. I accidentally tore one of them right along here. I'm not going to lift up all the pieces to show you that. But 2 standard size war game maps, all right, which you're used to. You're going to have one that's lengthways this way, and then this one down over here is widthways, like vertical and then horizontal, and that makes your map of Vietnam as it kind of comes down and scoots around in this direction. I'll pan the camera across so that you guys see all of it. Okay, so this is the northern part of our map itself, right? So this goes on along with South Vietnam, and then North Vietnam is the very tip right up here. So it's just that little bit right there. You got Vietnam shooting down all along here, and then of course all these countries that border it, Cambodia, Laos, and the others, going along that side of the board. So this is one map, and it also has the victory point track up here, and then any supply effects are referenced here on the board. Now let's pan down, let you guys see the bottom one. Okay, and this is me panning it out as much as I can to try to show you guys all this. Down over here, we do have our combat results table. During the showcase of the game, when I kind of give you the example of combat, I'm going to put a picture of that on the board so I don't have to try to pan over to show it to you guys. But you see where the vertical map changes here. So this one is horizontal down over here to where the body count is kept. And then the game turn track right there. Then you have the second map going along this way. This is the southern portion that has Saigon and all those areas pitching up that way. And then very up there at the top, we have our little storage spot. You can see right there in the corner of where all the aircraft are kept. That's just for the Allies. That's not for the North Vietnamese. This is a asymmetric fight. I really like that. All right, so also for the components, we're going to have a deck of cards for each side. The cards are going to look like this. So this is like the Allies cards, the South Vietnamese. And there's 13 cards. So 13 turns, 1 card per turn is what you get. But there's 2 sets of these, okay? So this game actually has more than just the 1972 campaign. You can actually play it as a separate 1975 campaign as well. That's not 13 turns, it's 10 turns. So in essence, you kind of got 2 games in one going for it. And the main setup is the 1972 fight, but you can play it in that separate way. And if you choose to do so, you'll have a separate set of cards. If you do decide to do that, you'll see the second set of cards here. They say 75 on them. So very easy to tell. You've got 1 through 13, 1 through 13. One says 75, one does not. And obviously you will shuffle these up before you start playing each one of your games. And like I said, there's a set for each side, the South Vietnamese and the North Vietnamese army. Besides that, all right, so we got our cards, got our maps. I'm going to touch on the units last. We've got a setup player aid for each side, right? So Allies and North Vietnamese, they tell you where the units are going to go. Now, it's a little different in the fact that they're not going to a specific hex per se. You can have a little bit of freedom on where you're going to put your troops. Certain troops will go in very specific spots, like American soldiers will go onto American bases. There's some rock troops here. They go on a very specific spot on the board. But when it comes into the ARVN forces or the North Vietnamese forces, you do have a little bit of freedom. They can be within, 2 hexes or so of specific areas on the map. And you see these areas are designated by these yellow terms here. So like Second Corps, Highlands, and then that's blotted off by this dotted line here. And it's the same way all across there. So certain units will be deployed in certain areas. So when we're looking at our thing here, this is our Allied deployment. Like I said, it's asymmetric because they have access to certain troop types that the North Vietnamese don't. The North Vietnamese don't have any helicopters, so they don't have any of those being deployed to the board. But like for 1 corps up here to the north, 5 infantry, an artillery, a tank, a couple of helicopters. Now there are some specifics that come into play in this game in the fact that certain units can't operate on their own. They have to have infantry with them. Tanks, for example, can operate on their own, but artillery and helicopters can't. So these 2 helicopters have to be placed with some infantry. So just as an example, let's look at our Highlands forces here. We've got 4 infantry, 2 artillery, 1 armored vehicle, and a couple of helicopters. They go right here. So let me scoot the camera down and let you guys see. Okay, so here are the Highland forces that I threw down onto the map. You'll see there's a cute little helicopter. God, I love these helicopters. Let me let you guys see it. Look at that. It's freaking awesome. Now, I will address this right up front. These are the softer plastic type minis that you'll see used in like toys or army figures, things like that. Now, that means that these smaller units with things like barrels or rotors like these guys, they can get bent in shipping. There's a very easy way to fix that. Okay, so things like these North Vietnamese artillery, they can easily have bent barrels, or the tanks might have a bent barrel when they get to you. They are so easy to fix. Just get a cup of hot water, microwave it for a minute, make the water as hot as possible, and literally you just dip the mini into it and it straightens out almost instantly. Then just hold it in whatever position you want to be in, blow on it a little bit, it'll cool down, straighten right out. For the most part, they were all fine for me. I had a handful of artillery pieces that were bent. Very, very, very easy to fix. Took me a matter of minutes. I got them all taken care of. But just so you know, this lighter type plastic can have those effects, okay? Our Highlands guys here for infantry, well, you see there's only 2 infantry markers, and that is because the infantry mini counts as one, and then this little disc underneath it counts as another. And that's going to operate that way for all of the Allied forces, okay? They'll use these little gray discs. You'll have the mini, and then for any extras that you have in that hex, they're going to be represented by those little gray discs. So if you have multiples of the artillery, the helicopters, the tanks, the fighting vehicles, whatever it is, you'll use those little discs to represent that. So 4 infantry are represented here because each one of these infantry have a little disc underneath them. But we've got a couple of artillery pieces, a couple of helicopters, this armored fighting vehicle. So all of those count as 1, but the infantry count as 2 because they have the little disc underneath them. Like I said, it's going to be that way for all of your other forces. If you've played games in a similar vein, you'll understand how this works. However, the North Vietnamese are different. So when we're looking at our North Vietnamese deployment, there are some key differences that come in to their infantry. As far as their other assets, their artillery, the tanks, trucks, all the other stuff, it all works the same. It doesn't matter for the trucks because they've only got 9 trucks, so you're not going to have to worry about having multiples of those. But with the infantry, their infantry alone specifically, each one of them will have a disc for each infantry in the hex. Okay, so the mini itself doesn't count as the infantry. It just shows you that there are infantry because there are multiple types of North Vietnamese infantry, and that is hidden information from the Allied player. So what do I mean by that? The Allied player, it's easy to see what he has because everything that is on the board is just representative, right? However many discs or minis that are there, that's how many infantry, how many forces they have. With the NVA player, though, there are different options. They have some different colored discs. Now, these are the extra discs that I have. These are things like being interdicted, disrupted, victory point control. So if the NVA gain control of towns across the board, they'll use these tokens. But they have access to some different colored discs. They will have green disc, black disc, gray disc, and red disc, which you don't see because they're already here on the map. And what that is for is when the NVA player is setting up, he's going to set up some of his troops. Then the South Vietnamese player, the ARVN player, is going to set up all of their troops. And then the NVA player sets up the remaining troops that they have, which is going to be a selection of tanks, artillery, and mystery infantry. So they have red disc as well. And those red disc can either be infantry or they might not be infantry. They could be divisions. They could be any number of different things, but it keeps the South Vietnamese player guessing as to their actual true troop locations and strength. So what I've done here is I've actually laid out, these are the troops that haven't actually been put onto the board yet. The rest have been deployed out. But for the NVA, all of these tokens are face down because all the face down tokens, even the gray ones, all have a green dot on the back. So you don't know what these are. If it's green on the front, that means that is a NVA division like this one. But if it's a red one, that counts as a mystery unit. So when they are finishing setting up their stuff, they're going to have a selection of these red tokens and green tokens. They can switch it out however they like, and then they'll place those last 7 infantry and different assets onto the board, and it's going to prevent the South player from knowing whether it's a real infantry division or if it's a mystery division. And both of these are going to act the same. They'll still have zones of control, need supply, all the other good stuff. They can even take over villages if there's no defense there. And you won't know that this is a mystery unit until they are attacked or they attack and are revealed. So the way those red discs work is there's actually a little mystery unit table here in the rulebook. And depending on your D6 roll, is going to affect what happens in combat with these guys. So you may end up placing a battle group, you may place an NLF regiment, you may place a division, or it could end up causing things like a B-52 airstrike. They might just be removed. It might cause some air mobile things to happen. So even the North player doesn't know exactly what's going to happen. It would be great for them if they got the division because that's their most powerful unit. It has the highest attack and defense values. But they might luck out and just get a battle group, which is gray and just has a combat value of 1. Regardless, over the course of the game, starting on turn 3, these red discs are going to start being removed. So over the course of it, they're going to go away. They're going to be removed along with the miniature and an asset. So the NBA forces are going to be reduced, and the South Vietnamese player will have a much better idea of what they're actually facing by turn 6, 7, 8, 9, and there's none of those red discs remaining. Now also on the back of each of the deployment boards is our terrain effects chart. That way there is one for each player, and it will tell you things like any movement point costs that are going to be applied, which is again asymmetrical. There are some areas of the map that are prohibited to certain units while they're not prohibited to others, but they might cost those others extra movement points. For example, the MVA can go into swamp and rough terrain while the ARVN units are not allowed to enter that type of terrain at all. Also, when it comes to the asymmetrics of the game, the units are going to have different attack and defense values. Things like the ARVN infantry, they have attack and defense values of 1. The US has values of 2. The ROC Republic of Korea, they have values of 3. The mechanized units, tanks and armored fighting vehicles, they have a value of 2 for attack, but only a defense point of 1. They do get to operate independently. Helicopters and artillery don't. But remember, like I said, there's multiple types of these NVA units. Division, NLF, regiment, battle group, or the mystery. And they can have a value of 4 or 2 and 1 or just flat out 1, depending on what color disc they are. So the disc represents what these units are. Again, key thing to keep in mind is for everyone else, every other type of unit, the mini counts as a unit, and however many discs that are under it, the gray disc, count as extra units themselves. NVA infantry are different. The infantry mini itself doesn't count as a unit. It's simply the disc that you're paying attention to there. And they do have a nice example of that in the rulebook here, so you understand that difference, because that is a key difference since their infantry are operating very much differently from the other types of units on the board. Also, if you look all up and down the map, there are a bunch of these truck units. These trucks, which are cool little minis, gotta love these little minis that I'm knocking all over the board, they are their own types of supply. When it comes to supply, the first couple of turns, the NVA forces are fine, but then they're gonna have to start worrying about making sure that they have their units in a attack supply status, or at least a general supply status. And that's going to come into play with their own types of tokens which we see here. This is a regular supply token that can be used to supply a NVA attack. However, they too have decoy supply tokens, and those are going to be spread all up and down the border of South Vietnam. So again, the South Vietnamese player is not going to know exactly what type of units are there, whether the units are real, and where the supply points are actually located. They might be all up north, they might be south, they might be spread all up and down. Okay, so how is the game itself going to be played? And the game's really easy. The sequence of play is going to start with the North Vietnamese player. They're going to do their reinforcement and card phase. There are reinforcements on both of the player aids, and they tell you what is coming in and what turn those are coming in. The NBA doesn't get quite as much as the South player does. The South player does get a fair amount of aircraft, but they also get a cruiser that comes in. And there's a cool little mini for that too. I got to show that to you guys. I got it sitting down over here. Look at this. Little cruiser that comes in, and it's going to sail up and down the coast here. And it'll be in different sections, and it can actually fire inland. It can't fire too far inland, just a couple of hexes, but it can actually kind of guard the coast from any NVA forces that come along. There's only one of these, but it's still nice to have. So you do your reinforcement phase, you'll get your card for that turn, which can be played just depending on when the card allows it. It can give you a combat bonus, it can give you an extra troop, it can let you trade troops. There's a multitude of different things that happen with the cards. You go to your movement phase as the NVA, then your combat phase. So you'll move all your troops. You have 6 movement points with each type of troop. And they can move along depending on the terrain effects chart, you know, how many points it costs them to move into different terrain. Then they'll go into their combat phase, and they'll announce all their attacks that they're going to make all along the board. Personally, I would probably either turn the minis or use some separate type of token to declare if you have a bunch of separate attacks that are going on, and then maybe work your way top to bottom. You can choose your attacks however you like. So if there's one you want to do first, you are allowed to do that. And then after your combat phase, you'll go into your rally phase, where any units that have been interdicted or disrupted will roll and try to rally and remove that disruption marker. Now, the allied player has the exact same phases for their turn that the North does, with the exception of one thing. So the North will do all of their movement, combat, rallying, all that good stuff, goes to the South, and they're going to start doing their thing, with the exception that they have the air attack and naval gunfire phase that is going to take place. Now, that is where they get to use all of their aircraft, like the F4 Phantoms. They've got, I forget all the others. They got the gunship, B-52s. They can choose any targets that they want all across the board, doesn't matter where it is, and perform their airstrike. So the Allies start off with about 13 points worth of air power, and they can divide that up to conduct an attack against any different hex that they want to. There is their own separate combat results table when it comes to either the cruiser fire or air attacks to get the results, whether it's retreats or elimination, all that good stuff. The only stipulation they have is they can't allocate all of their air power to a single attack. They can only allocate half, rounded down, to a single hex, and then the rest has to be spread out. All right, so let's give a quick example of play here. Again, I'm not going through everything because there is a fair amount of hidden information that kind of restricts a little bit of solitaire play, but I do want to show you guys how combat's going to work, right? So let's say we've got our North Vietnamese troops here. They want to move in, boom, boom. They move during their turn phase. And actually, I'm going to move this one over a little bit because I do believe that's rough terrain, which is prohibitive to the ARVN units, but that's fine. The MVA units can use it. So he goes 1, 2, 3, moves over here. Now, the ARVN unit does exert a zone of control. The MVA can move into it, but it can cost him extra movement points. And then during his combat phase, let's say he wants to conduct an attack here against the ARVN units, the South Vietnamese units here. We already know we've got 2 infantry, an artillery, and a helicopter here, but what is attacking it? Well, there we simply flip it over and we see that this is a green unit. So this is a division strength. So 4 attack strength and 4 defense strength. Well, this actually comes out, even though it looks like an uneven fight since they have artillery and a helicopter and 2 infantry, this is an even fight because this is a larger strength unit. This is 4 against 4, so this would be a 1-to-1. Their defensive strength and attack strength is both 1. So 1 for the infantry here, 1 for the disc, 1 for the helicopter, 1 for the artillery, comes up to a total of 4. So we would roll on the combat results table a 1-to-1 attack. Well, let's say we rolled a 4 on our attack. That would ultimately be a attacker retreats 1. So our NVA troops here would have to retreat back 1 hex, and once they are done with their attack, that disc gets flipped back over. Once they're exposed, it doesn't stay exposed. So you're going to flip this and they'll retreat back. Attacks are just that simple. You're going to have either a retreat of 1, a retreat of 2, interdiction, disruption, or elimination as possible results. A unit that is already disrupted that does have a retreat 2, though, is going to be eliminated instead of retreating. Something cool to pay attention to, though, is you see there's a number in these little town hex. This is the militia value, okay? So if there is a number higher than 0, that actually gets added to the defense strength or just has to be defeated by the NVA units coming in. So you see a town over here has a 1, this one has a 1. There's some that have 2s and 3s and whatnot. Saigon has a lot of inherent defense strength. So that has to be beat as well. It's kind of like the militia and police forces that are located there. Okay, so let's say that play continues on and it's now the South's turn and they're in their air phase and they decide that they're going to conduct an air attack over here against that division since they are causing a little bit of trouble trying to take control of the towns. So they send 3 F4s worth of attack points over here to attack our MVA division. Each one of those are worth 2. So that's 6 points worth of an air attack being conducted against this NVA troop. And again, I'll throw the chart up in the corner so you guys can see it, but you guys see that it can cause that many air points attacking can cause some severe damage to the NVA depending on what they roll. So let's say they roll good and they get a 1, which I bump, on their result. Well, that means this NVA troop is now eliminated and they're going to be placed into that body count box. So it is just that simple. You would place them over here, signifying the fact that they've been taken out. Now, the only exception to that, though, is the fact that when it comes to our division strength, our dark green guys here, when they are eliminated the first time, they actually get replaced with a MVA battle group. Okay, so that's the gray disc version. So it would actually take the same place that the MVA division was, and their attack and defense strength is only a 1. So the division got destroyed or severely weakened, and now a battle group has taken its place. The air assets that you used simply get returned to the airplanes box as used, and they get to be used again on the following turn. Okay, now that's a real high level kind of glance at the game, but I've hit the basic pertinent points of it. Key thing is the MVA is trying to gain control as many of these towns and bases that they possibly can. They can get bonuses for controlling the entire region, and depending on the score at the end of the 13 turns, if the MVA hits a certain point level, then they're considered to have won, or if the allies are able to defend and keep the MVA from gaining enough victory points, then the allies are considered to have won. My only other concern is I was thinking, okay, can this be solitaired? And the hidden information is the one key aspect of it that kind of throws it off. When it comes to the supply, I'm not overly worried about that as hidden information. It's more of these troops. And the best idea that I had about that when it comes to trying to solitaire something like this would be to take those original 7 disc, the 7 red disc, mix them all up with your deployment. Okay. So the NVA guys, not the NLF, they're special deployments. These guys actually get deployed into South Vietnam. The rest do not. They're placed within 2 hexes of the region, but outside of South Vietnam. All these infantry, okay? All of these, with the exception of the mystery, start off with a green division level token. I would simply mix in the red ones with all of those and then just deploy them all together, right? So even the player doesn't know which ones the red ones are or not, okay? That way, if they go to attack, whether the NVA is attacking or they're being attacked by the South Vietnamese forces, when you flip them to find out if they are a red one, then you'll roll on the table, see what happens. Or if it gets later into the game and you have to remove some of these in an asset, simply go around till you find a red disc and remove the associated infantry. Generally speaking, you're not going to have the NVA forces stacked that much. The South Vietnamese forces, they're going to stack. You're going to have more infantry, more concentrated forces. But for the NVA, it does not behoove them to stack, because if they do stack, that's just a key point for the South player to use their air forces to attack, right? Because if they have, 4 or 5 infantry in a single hex, you're allowed to have as many as you want. Then hell yeah, you want to take and conduct that air attack, because it could wipe out or disrupt many of the units that are in that hex. So most of the NVA troops are going to be operating as a single infantry with an asset or 2 with them. In that case, it should be relatively easy just to mix these in and try to solitaire it. Overall, I definitely like the game. I think it looks cooler in hell with all the little minis spread across the board, and trying to figure out, what you're going to do, the hidden information, the supplies for later on to attack. Do you want to focus them here? Do you want to focus there? Do you want to spread them out? Because they only have such and such, I think it's 8 hexes range to be used for their attacks later on. Again, for the first couple of turns, the NVA doesn't have to worry about that, but it does become an issue later on, because if they're not supplied, then their attack strength can start to be reduced, and that's going to really hurt those NVA forces. The South Vietnamese forces, they're rather troop light. They're not horribly troop light, but they're rather troop light compared to the NVA, especially with all the NVA divisions that are spread across the board. So the South has to make use of the fact that they have substantial air assets against the North Vietnamese, especially the fact that they can do air cav type movements to lift their infantry from one town to another to get out. So their ability to move is much greater than the NVA forces, and they have the ability to do specific strikes against certain hexes, whereas the NVA doesn't. They have to try to mass their forces. And then obviously you have things like the cards that are going to bring in just that little bit of chaos into the game and that unpredictability. And again, if you were going to try to solitaire that, since there is only a hand of 1 card, you don't really have to worry about it. If you wanted to AI the other side, the NVA, for example, you simply draw a card and flip it over and play it when it's applicable. I think I mentioned this earlier, but I do want to make sure I mention it. My one specific ding is I do not believe that the deployment, the NVA deployment specifically, was fleshed out enough. I think it should have said on here somewhere that all of these forces, with the exception of the red ones, are the green disc NVA, because it does not say that. It's NVA and NLF. There are 2 types of NVA, right? There are the divisions, and then there are the battle groups. Battle groups come into play later when divisions start to be taken out. They get replaced, green disc with the gray disc, so reduced combat effectiveness. that's all well and good. But if you haven't played the game and you don't know that, the player aid doesn't tell you that. It's relatively easy to find the information online, but one sentence here would have alleviated that problem. But yeah, ultimately, I like it. I think it's a neat game. I love the components. I love the little minis. To me, that's always been cooler. And hell, that's really what makes the game stand out for me. If it were counters, you would get the same effect, but it wouldn't look as cool. But this just looks neat with all the little minis spread across the board. Kind of gives you that general feel that you're looking down at a table using your little command staff, pushing the forces around. I just get a kick out of that. So ultimately, I will say that I think the game is better for 2 players than it is solitaire. I do believe it can be solitaire. I think you're going to have to work at it a little bit, make a few concessions when it comes to gameplay. But ultimately, do I think you can solitaire it? Yes. It's just not going to be the easiest one to solitaire. Anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Like I said, please check out Cadet Game stuff. If you like the mini look, right, that Axis and Ally feel, gameplay that's deep enough to give you the war game feel, but not overly complex that you're going to be buried in a rule book. You just want to sit there, chuck some dice, and have some fun moving crap around the table. These games are more than going to fill that out for you. Anyway, that's going to be it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Y'all take care, and I will catch you in the next one.